Hey, looking for something fun to do tonight? St. Louis County Library, 7 p.m. tonight for a book signing and a book reading. Our next guest will be there, and we have a large Bosnian community here in St. Louis, and they're going to know about this. And if you just want to know about a great story, it might be a great chance to hear a great story. Canon Trebincevic is going to be at the St. Louis County Library tonight at 7 p.m. across the street from Plaza Frontenac for book signing and a book reading. His new book is The Bosnia List. Canon Trebincevic, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thank you, Mr. Milhaven.
How'd I do with that name?
Awesome.
So far, so good. McGraw, please. Mr. Milhaven. No, not going to work. You were born in Bosnia.
Correct.
When did you come to America?
October 20th, 1993.
You very easily could have ended up here in St. Louis. How did you end up in New York? How did that work? Why did some go to New York, some come to St. Louis?
For us, the way it worked out, when we lived in Austria, we filed paperwork to come to the States, and Connecticut Interfaith Council, consisting of churches and synagogues, sponsored us.
And they just, for whatever reason, you landed on the New York list and you ended up in New York. Showed up in New York at Connecticut, I'm sorry. Showed up in New York at age 13, coming from a war-ravaged country to Connecticut. It must have been a mind-blowing experience for you.
Big change. I mean, for example, we didn't have electricity for 10 months that we lived there, so there's so many bright lights that were hurting my eyes. And I used to watch a lot of 90210 and American shows, so I thought here I was going to surf and ride in...
You thought America was 90210.
Palm trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of Kelly Taylors walking around in
no Kelly
Connecticut.
Taylors, yeah.
No. All right, so how much English did you know?
Barely, just minimum. Just to get by. I took private lessons and I took it in school.
Okay. Your family in Bosnia before the upheaval was middle-class family, is that safe to say?
Yeah, middle class, upper middle class.
What did your parents do?
My dad was a sports trainer. He owned his own fitness center.
Right.
My mom worked for like a marketing company.
And when Yugoslavia fell apart, that's when your world changed forever.
On May 1st, 1992. Personally.
You came to America, and for the past 20 years, you have become Americanized.
Of course, yep.
In all ways,
assimilated,
shapes, and forces. You then decided to write the book or finish the book?
Decided to write the book.
Decided to write the book. And what was the idea of the Bosnia List?
Well, let me tell you first how that came to life. I'm a physical therapist who lives in Queens. I work in Manhattan, and I had a physical therapy patient named Susan Shapiro. She was a journalism professor and a memoirist. And she was too bored with physical therapy, never paid attention to her exercises. We always joked around. So every time we walk away, she would take another stack of essays to grade. So I jokingly walked over and asked, is the assignment what I did on summer vacation? And she said, actually, the first assignment I give to my students is to write 3 pages about your most humiliating secret. So I laughed out loud and said, ha, you Americans, why would anyone reveal that? And she said, because it helps you heal and editors want unusual voices. And that night, when I emailed her to ask her how her back was feeling, she sent me a piece her student wrote about how she and her mother, Holocaust survivor, ate bacon cheeseburgers on Yom Kippur to cope with the anniversary of the suicide of her father. And that unlocked something in me. Next day, I showed her 3 pages. First time I ever wrote and rewrote with her, and wound up New York Times Magazine.
So after that conversation, you scribbled down 3 pages of your story.
Correct.
And she decided to help you write the memoir.
I took her book seminar class where I met the agent,
right.
And they both agreed I should expand it to memoir.
The book is called The Bosnian List. Canon Trebincevic is our guest. He's going to be at a book signing tonight and a book reading. You decided to go back to your home country and to face all the things you faced 20 years ago?
Yeah, after living 2 decades in America, my father desperately wanted to go back, being widowed and living close to my brother and I. He was always a wonderful father who never said anything my brother and I asked for, so we agreed to take him. But at first, I lied to myself that we were only doing this for him. But I quickly realized it was time for me to face my past, and I created a list of what I wanted to do there. So while most 30-year-old single American guys spent their vacations partying and romance, on my list was visiting graveyards, monuments, and confronting the betrayers who threw us out.
Tell me about your karate coach.
Per I knew since age 6. He was my second hero, of course, after my father. And in middle May 1992, he came to my home, to our door, with an AK-47 and an angry army troop shouting, "Trubincevic, you have 1 hour to leave or you'll be killed."
He was your coach.
He was my coach, mentor. Yep.
Now, he was a Serb?
Yeah, he was a Bosnian Christian, so.
A Bosnian Christian,
Serb.
and you were a Muslim.
Yes.
And he was your coach. And you were, from all accounts, good friends, friendly. He was
My mom made meals. He came to our house and, celebrated holidays with these people. She had birthdays.
And, but the Bosnian story, even though it's been told, not a people know enough, it was a normal country, right, friends? You were the Muslims and the Christians and everybody and the Serbs and the Croats were all living together. And then one day, everyone became evil. And it became brother against brother, friend against friend.
Yeah, also you had instances with mixed marriages, too, that split up as a result of upheaval.
Right. What happened? What happened in Bosnia? How did that happen?
I mean, now that I look back, it didn't really happen overnight. Before Tito died, he kept the nationalists, Serbs, quiet for decades. And 1980, when he died, that's when things started to heat up. And in 1989, Milosevic had this famous speech in Kosovo, creating a huge Serbian uprising against the other ethnic groups.
Right. But it was more or less of telling people your plight in life is not your own doing. It's the fault of the Muslims.
Of course. I mean, the same way, the same story with Nazis and Jews 40, 50 years earlier.
Very similar here in America these days with, say, homosexuals. Right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's not that far of a leap to say, hey, you know what? These people aren't living the way we should. Shame on them. We should kick them out of restaurants and bars.
I mean, all we need a charismatic leader to usually appeal to non-educated in rural areas. And I mean, before the war started, they used to deliver buses to towns when political parties rose to power, and they had a huge pep rallies, I call them.
You wanted to go back to your homeland to do what? You wanted to find this coach, did you not?
I wanted to find Pero's grave. I wanted to stand on his grave, make sure he was really dead.
You brought a couple of bottles of water so you could drink them, so you could pee on his grave.
So I told my brother. I mean, he saw me buy. I told my brother I need 2 bottles of water, and he said, "Why? Because you want to pee on his grave?" I said, "Yes."
Because he was your friend, and one day he was your friend, and the next day he wanted to kill you.
I mean, to me, like growing up, when I used to watch, like action war movies with my dad, war always was fought between 2 distant countries, like Battle of the Bulge, Germans versus British.
Right.
I never thought it would be people who spoke the same language, neighbors, friends, mentors, teammates.
Yeah.
They would throw my dad into a concentration camp like he did.
You also, the book is called The Bosnia List. Canon Trubincevic is our guest. How am I doing on that name?
Awesome. Better than some of my friends for 20 years.
He's at the St. Louis County Library tonight for a book signing and a book reading. We have a large Bosnian contingent here in America, and here in St. Louis. And what's striking to me about the Bosnian community here in St. Louis is that they've been here 20 years, and they're sort of woven into the fabric of America. They have Bosnian restaurants, which you go and you have the great Bosnian food, but they're wearing a cardinal cap. They're wearing a blues cap. They're, they go to the Arch. They become St. Louisans, and yet they brought their heritage with them, very similar to the Irish and the Italians and everybody else. I guess that's similar in New York, too?
I'm very proud to be Bosnian Muslim, mostly because of my heritage, but I'm very privileged to be American citizen as well, because friends, colleagues, and mentors of all backgrounds have been sensitive and supportive of my past.
Right.
And I can definitely have a dual life, and I love it, where I can split to both. I have my college American friends, and I have my Bosnian friends. But when I came to the States, we lived in Connecticut up till 2007. I didn't have any Bosnian friends. The first Bosnian friends I had was when I moved to Queens. And the first Bosnian food I had made in restaurant was in Queens.
Because in Connecticut, they just didn't understand it? It just wasn't there?
I
just
grew
sort of
up
turned
in
away from it?
No, I mean, Fairfield County, where I lived, there weren't any Bosnians. There weren't any restaurants. I know there's a small population in Hartford, Connecticut,
right,
but that's way up, in the countryside.
Yeah. Tell me about this Sava Bridge you wanted to go see.
Sava Bridge is very symbolic to my family and the whole town itself. It separates Bosnia from Croatia, and they're basically fishing grounds. Regattas, fish. It was a place in my childhood where I used to go fish, throw rocks, swim with my dad. have picnics.
Right. And the bridge was destroyed.
It was destroyed on April 30th, 1992, and the saddest part is it was blown up with a couple hundred refugees while they were crossing over to Croatia to safety.
The bridge has since been rebuilt.
In 1996, when Americans came after the Dayton Peace Accord to keep the two sides apart, since my town was, and it still is, very strategically located, they rebuilt the bridge.
Yeah. Being an American or being a Muslim in America for the last 20 years probably hasn't been the easiest thing for you.
I've never had any issues or problems, especially being approached after 9/11. Nobody doubted my beliefs. I mean, when I came here, people asked me, do you pray 5 times a day? And we consider ourselves very secular. And even growing up, I never seen a woman covered in hijab until I actually came here. Usually in our country, prior to the war, older ladies were more religious. But now the reason people are more religious is out of spite.
Out of spite?
Out of spite.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they tried to destroy us, so how can I preserve my own heritage?
Oh, I see. So
exactly.
Defiant, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. You write in the book, The Bosnia List, you went back to apologize for yourself as well. Talk about that for a moment. Yeah,
I wanted to apologize to especially my cousin, whom I lost touch with. Another reason we went back was I grew up in America. I've never had little cousins that I can go take shopping or play with. And I thought by the family not contacting us that they didn't want to be close to us. But it was easier for us to stay in touch with them than vice versa, because they had a lot worse.
Right. Unimaginable horror you saw in your first 13 years over there. Have you gone to therapy? Has it reared its head in other ways? How have you dealt with that?
I never had post-traumatic stress disorder. I never lost sleep over it. But it's always a discussion in a home or if you're with a Bosnian. All they have to do is bring a name up, and then you kind of have this like flashback. And anger kind of comes out. You know, I call it like a beehive. Like, don't step on a beehive nest, because you might stir it up. But it's funny that you asked that. My co-author, Susan Shapiro, asked me, didn't you talk about this with your parents, your feelings? And I laughed. I said, yeah, right. They were busy telling me to duck at the time. And also, culturally, we don't, especially men, it's very like macho society where you don't share your feelings with other family members. You don't want to burden them. They've been burdened enough.
Right.
Especially coming here and just starting a life over. You don't want to tell them how you feel about the karate coach.
Did you feel, when you went back, well, let me ask you this question. Did you feel Americanized?
I have, because I questioned a lot of things, the way they're done there, like administration, the way people thought. Biggest example I had, I love your question, by the way, was when someone was complaining about the current structure of the government in the city, and I turned over to this guy, and I looked at him, I said, well, in Egypt, in a very radical, should I say, Muslim country, they were able to overthrow the government. You can easily do it here. What do you know? You live in America. You guys left. So that's when I knew to keep my mouth shut and finish my beer and be on my way.
So there is a bit of this, hey, you left, we stayed. You don't have a right to tell us what to talk.
Yeah, but look under what circumstances I stayed. I stayed for 10 months, and maybe that person actually left during the war and came back.
Right.
So
how is Bosnia now? Is it it's a safer place, right? I mean, the killings have stopped, correct?
Only thing that changed since November 21st, 1995, when the dysfunctional and unjust Dayton Peace Accord was signed, was the guns were put down. Right now, it's a one big halftime show, and the current unrest and social uprising, its roots lie in the Dayton Peace Accord, which was signed in 1995. It was very noble out of President Clinton to stop the killings. However, what America did was it contradicted its policy for democracy, human rights, and justice by forcing us to sign a peace treaty, because it allowed Serbs to keep ethnically cleansed territories they took, and it basically awarded them.
Right.
Up to that point, Bosnians and Croatians were mobilizing, and I thought I was going home when I lived in Connecticut. I'm like, 2 more weeks, wouldn't be freed, because 20% of the territory was taken back in 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden, it's like, no, you guys, we're bombing you if you don't stop advancing against Serbs.
Right. The Muslim, Christians, Serbs, Croats, Muslims, that argument, that those feelings over there didn't come over here, right? I mean, it's sort of it was left at it was left at the shore. Is that a fair statement?
Not quite. There are instances where, like, there was an instance I wrote one of my articles. My first articles I wrote was called Marshall Tito in Queens, and it's owned by Bosniak. It's a restaurant, lounge, and a bar, which was meant to bring different Yugoslavian factions together. It worked out for a year until someone threw a nationalistic Serb sign when one of the Serbian singers came upon a boombox.
Right.
And it all went to hell from there, and there were knife stabbings, and the fight broke out and closed. But overall, I think they're more civil here than there.
What's the best part of being an American citizen, seeing what you've seen?
Best part of being an American citizen? There are many, but I'm going to tell you one. As long as you do your job and are a decent person, you can succeed. No one looks at you and judges you, your name, background, religion.
Or those funny socks you wear.
I want my socks. I wish I brought nicer socks. I'm gonna buy a pair, send it to you.
Canon Trebincevic is our guest. It's an amazing story. Up until the age of 13, all you basically knew was war and death and savagery from neighbors and friends. And you came over to America. In the last 20 years, you have become an American citizen, and you have written a book called The Bosnia List. And you're going to be at St. Louis County Library tonight for a book signing and a book reading. I suspect you're going to have quite a few Bosnian Americans come along and talk to you. It's going to be an interesting night for you. What's the one thing you want people to take from your book? It's an inspirational story in a sense that you were able to survive and you were able to sort of beat back your demons. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I would say diversity, transformation. Resilience. At first, when I started writing a book, it was a personal matter. My co-author Susan Shapiro said to me, and she quoted Joan Didion line, "I write to find out what I think," and I never really made full sense of how and why we survived. And for me, that came to be very true, and I took her line, her quote, really to heart. And I felt like a mouse in a maze, where every time I found another roadway, there was one more roadblock I had to find my way around.
Mm-hmm.
And while at first I felt like a young boy who lost his happy childhood, I came to understand how amazingly lucky we were.
Yeah. There were many Americans at the time who were divided about whether or not to provide air cover for Bosnia at the time. You or your friends and relatives, I mean, you understand the sacrifice America made, or at least what's the other question I want to ask? I want you to speak to the people who you mentioned Bill Clinton. Well, you mentioned Bill Clinton, and he the Dayton Peace Accords stopped the killing.
Exactly.
But it wasn't a perfect situation. Was there a perfect situation?
We didn't need. We had plenty of manpower. We didn't need American manpower. What we needed was to lift the arms embargo. Now, according to the United Nations Charter, any independent country that's a member of the United Nations has a right to defend itself. And since we're a UN member, we weren't allowed to. I'm going to just read you a quick passage from the page 59. Yeah, it could be too stressful and perilous to return to our town where the same people who persecuted us were still in power. The complex aftermath of the Balkan bloodshed and stories we heard put me on edge. After we fled to January 1993, the fighting intensified. Eventually, Bosnians and Croatians mobilized against Serbs, whom we were finally about to overtake in 1995. Unfortunately, NATO, led by the United States and Britain, intervened. It was the worst blow of our lives when the Western leaders imposed the deeply flawed Dayton Accords in November of 1995. Even President Clinton admitted this inequity. In controversial documents and recordings published in the book The Clinton Tapes, he disclosed that during negotiations, NATO allies felt that independent Bosnia would be unnatural as the only Muslim nation in Europe. The British, French, and Russians favored the arms embargo on Bosnian Muslims precisely because it locked in Bosnia's disadvantage. France's President Mitterrand told Clinton that Bosnia did not belong among European nations, and the British officials spoke of a painful but realistic restoration of Christian Europe.
That is from the book, The Bosnia List. Canon Trebincevic, still not bad. Still not bad.
You're from Long Island, so.
I am from Long Island. Don't hold that against me. That's the only name I'll get right. Tonight, St. Louis County Library, 7 p.m. for a book signing and a book reading. Cannon, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks so much.
Safe travels. 9:30 here, Big 550 KTRS.